Hey guys, it's me. Today I just wasn't feeling it, um, but then I was feeling it, and so I came up with a little topic to share with everybody today. So let's get into it in this sort of webcam chill style. I have my Tennessee sweatshirt on today. It's probably backwards, but yes, it is. Okay, anyway. Today I want to talk a bit about an anger disorder called intermittent explosive disorder, IED. And I really haven't addressed anger on my YouTube channel at all, but I did do like a road rage video on my blog. Blog post on my blog, so like that's cool. You can check that out. But anyway, haven't really done anger because anger is sort of a really hard emotion to talk about. No one really wants to hear or talk about anger. Like ever, like there's such a stigma around this emotion, but this is just one of the many, 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 many emotions that humans feel, and it's a totally, human one, not to sound redundant. And so, yeah, today I'm going to open up to you about intermittent explosive disorder. So, what is intermittent explosive disorder? Well, what a fun topic. It is an impulse control disorder. So, the impulse control disorders also include kleptomania, which is like you're obsessed with stealing, pyromania, which means you light things on fire on impulse. So yes, but instead, intermittent explosive disorder is an impulse control disorder that's characterized by explosive outbursts, anger, that are disproportionate to the situation at hand, or one website said grossly out of proportion to whatever just happened. People won't get it when you're mad, and at least for me, there is absolutely no pattern of a trigger. It could be legitimately anything at any point in time. You could be feeling any emotion before that, and then suddenly everything changes. It's not the same as having BPD. It's not the same as having bipolar 2. You can look those up. You can look up the differences, but they're not the same. Anyway, so very fascinating, very fascinating. Okay. All right, so like I was saying, you could change your mood from totally fine to incredibly angry in the snap of a finger, and you will go 0 to 100 and feel like you are unable to control it at all. Like there's no, how I always explain it is there's no thoughts that are happening. It's just your body or your rage takes over, the emotion takes over. There's no logic. There's no thoughts of thinking things through. There's no, I'm going to slow this down now. There's none of that. There's no thoughts happening. So for a while, what I focused on in therapy and with psychiatry and my medications was how can I slow everything down so that I have a chance to actually think about things. So that was like something we worked on. It wasn't the answer for me, but anyway, keep going. Generally, if you have IED, a lot of the times you're irritable, impulsive, aggressive, or chronically angry. And so how you would be diagnosed with IED instead of just like having an anger problem or like, whatever. How you'd be clinically diagnosed is, I don't know the correct numbers on this off the top of my head. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something like if you have X amount, 2, 3 amount of very, very big outbursts in a year. Very, very big means like huge property damage, like very bad accident, a very big one, right? And then you also have a series of smaller ones, like in a month or in a week. So you'll have like several smaller ones that don't amount to these big outbursts, but like still have an impact and are still part of it. So yeah, when I heard that, I was like, that's definitely me. So I will mention at this point in the video, if I were to be psychologically evaluated again right now, it would probably be the case, or even in a few months, that I probably would not come out with this diagnosis anymore because I really have not had a lot of anger issues. I haven't had a large outburst since September, October, and I'll get into more of why that is later. But yeah, but this is sort of my experience from, you know, September, October, and before then. Not saying that my journey is done here, but I've done a lot of work on this. So sort of the progression of my IUD. So like as a little girl, I would say like 10, maybe 10 it was starting, I would have explosive fights over the smallest things. I still find that being a problem for me, having explosive fights with the core or like the spark being a very small thing. And that happened in, those included things like property damage, kicking out walls, and ramming things into walls, different things. I remember it was really sad. I threw my iPod Touch as hard as I possibly could on the linoleum floor. And that was the end of that, and it was really sad because that thing was so cool. I was like 12 and I had my iPod Touch that I saved all my money for, and then that was just the end of it. So that sucked. But anyway, several iPhones have been damaged since then. So thousands of dollars worth of damage, which is characteristic of this disorder, as well as so financial ramifications, legal ramifications. I'm very thankful to not have been in trouble with the law for my behavior, but there are many cases when that could have been the possibility with, you know, being like a public nuisance or belligerent, like any sort of those things, driving tickets. So yeah, so those are some of the things about it. Okay. Then in college, I found that it was the worst in my junior year when I was living with 4 other girls. And it was way better before then when living with less people. When there were 4 people, I mean, I felt like I had nowhere to go. I was annoyed all the time, and I was also very depressed that year, which I'll talk about later, which is considered a comorbidity, which means that at the same time that I ID, I also had depression, and so they feed into each other. And if you have one, you're more likely to have another, like a disorder. And then last summer, I'll talk about. Last summer, I was last summer, I had an internship. It was downtown. I started off by driving my car. It got to the point where I could not handle driving a car anymore. I think I knew that was going to be the case, but there was one day when something happened and I said, I can't drive a car anymore. You have to pick me up right now. I'm never driving a car again. And so after that happened, my mom would drive me around, and to get to work every day, I would take the bus, like an hour there, an hour back, thereabouts. And that was only to the mall. So then I'd have to also go home from there with a ride. So it was bad last summer. It was something I had to work on 24/7 to make sure that I wouldn't blow up. I just felt angry all the time. Everything was anger. And it's not a good thing to have. Like a lot of the things is if you talk about, if you know, there are similarities to, you know, like bipolar disorder. If you're coming down from mania and you're sort of in a hybrid state, manic and depressive at the same time, you have enough energy to carry out some thoughts that you may have when you're depressed. And so it's actually very, very dangerous to be a mix of the two. So I kind of feel that around IED sometimes as well. And like I said, as triggers for me, I mean, one time I wrote out all the triggers I could think about. It is the most, it's like elevators, and then it's like customer service, and then it's like just like the most random things that have no connection to each other. And yes, maybe those two have connections, but the only pattern I could come up with is a lot of the times it was around expectations of others and not being able to control certain situations like group projects. That's also a comorbidity issue as well with my obsessive compulsive personality disorder, because that's really what that's about, is control. And so now I'll talk a second about comorbidities. So I'm actually just going to, comorbidities means like you're more likely to have a certain disease because you have another one. It says the simultaneous presence of two chronic diseases or conditions in a patient. Co meaning they're both existing within you. So I had IED at the same time I had obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Those are very tied together. You have very, very high standards of perfection in OCPD, and so if those standards were not met, it would mean I would be very upset and I would be angry and I would have an outburst. Additionally, tied to depression, I started to find, working with a therapist and psychiatrist team, that I would have sort of cycles in. So we were sort of looking at, like, is it hypomania? What's the one? Cyclothymia, that one. So we were sort of looking at that, but it's more like I'm doing fine in the beginning of the week. The end of the week comes, I'm not doing as well, and the weekends, like Friday, Saturday's like huge explosion, and then Sunday's like recuperating, and then I'm back to, and then so it was the same thing over and over. So a lot of times it was like after an outburst I would go into a depression, but also in a depression I would be more likely to be angry than if I was in a normal state. So like it just, the things just really work together. At one point, my psychiatrist said, what if we tried to get the depression under control and see what that did for the anger? And that's ultimately where the best results came from, is when I went on Prozac. It didn't work at first. I went up. And I've been at 40. So that's like, it's not the highest dose. But I'm at 40, and that's been the biggest help. I tried things like propranolol, which is meant to slow you down. It slows down your heart rate, so it lowers your blood pressure, and the thought is to give you time in between your thought and your action. It didn't work. I took it 4 times a day, like clockwork. Didn't work. Guanfacine, the first thing I was put on, which makes like no sense. I don't know why. It's like a lot of times it's used for aggression in autism, and so they thought that like maybe that would help with some of my aggression. It didn't work. Anyway, so bad, not good. But the thing that actually started helping was taking an antidepressant, trying to get the depression under control. And when I was less depressed, I had less of a problem with anger. So that's sort of where I'm at. So I want to reiterate that I was in therapy from May, like weekly, with some like spurts of breaks, from May through December. So that's a very long time for my life. It's a very long time for my life to have been in therapy that much. That is multiple different people, multiple different locations, transitions, all of that stuff. Really no major outbursts since September, October. It is now April. I will say so now that we're in a pandemic, I do not have to drive, but when I was driving to work, I was doing okay. I was doing pretty well. There are a couple times that you can feel things about to sort of come up, but there are ways that I deal with that, and you can also look at my blog post about road rage, because I talk about some of those things. Like, for example, while technically not the safest, you can move your mirrors. So if there's someone behind me, like on like tailgating me, and it's making me really angry, I'll switch my mirrors up so I cannot see them. So I continue just focus on what's in front of me and go straight. Like things like that can help in driving. Again, if I were to do a psych eval, I'm not sure that intermittent explosive disorder would come up as of right now, or in 4 or 6 months. I don't know that I would have that. I act very differently than I have, but not to say that I wouldn't become more angry, more depressed. So what kind of things did I actually do in therapy? And also I talk about bibliotherapy. Bibliotherapy is literally reading as therapy. So like I remember last summer I got so many books about anger, depression, anxiety, even reading Prozac Nation, which is a memoir. Wow. And even reading Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which is about creativity, somehow really helps. Like all these little things. And I have an awesome, it's like this itty bitty book by pema chodron. Chodron. That is so good. It is that helped me with my anger the most. I think was that reading that book. But anyway, in therapy and in bibliotherapy, you're working to rewire your thoughts and discover new ways of thinking things that you could practice, and then side effect of Prozac. Rewire your thoughts to discover new ways of thinking that can then override your current paths in your brain that are just nasty and do not serve you well. That mini book I'm talking about was really good for me. So I can totally do a video more in depth about controlling or subsiding anger through your thoughts, or like techniques or some of the things that I've actually found. Like there's this one podcast that I talk about often called Help Me Be Me. Oh god. Anyway, so she talks about creating bonfires, and so even if you, so bonfires being an outburst or anger, so even if you have all the materials to make a bonfire, does that mean you have to make the bonfire? No, it doesn't. Because you can just not make the bonfire. So even like little quotes like that have helped me, and I have those or can come up with them or pull them from where I got them. So that could be a video as well. But I hope you are taking care of yourselves. I hope that you learned a little bit about IED. I'm sure you did. And have a wonderful night.